Hey there, this is Alexis Knight, and today we are starting something different. You might know me from some of the stories, sharing some of those interrogations. Maybe someone sent you a clip. Maybe this is your first time hearing me. Either way, here is what you need to know. I don't play by the usual rules. I don't care who's in power, who's got the mic, or what the press release says. If something is off, I'm going to say it. If no one's asking the real question, I am going to ask it. And if a courtroom, a company, or a headline is full of it, you better believe I'm going to pull it apart right in front of you, because this is true crime in the court of public opinion. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, this is the space. We dig in, 1 hour, 2 segments or so, no filler, no fake drama, no distractions. You get the story, you get the impact, and then you get the truth underneath it all. Because let's be real, most shows, they just repeat headlines. They act like they're asking questions, but they have already picked a side. I don't do that. I talk to you like a human being, like someone who sees the cracks in the story and wants to know what is actually going on. Now, in today's episode, this is personal, this is explosive. It's California, and it's burning in every way. So for segment 1 here in this episode, we're going to go back to the case that you maybe thought was over. Maybe you kind of forgot about it. It's in the back of your brain somewhere. The Menendez brothers. Hopefully you've been hearing about it lately, but the public is shifting a bit. Things are getting quiet. Now, 2 rich kids from Beverly Hills, they shot their parents with a shotgun in 1989. You remember the suits, the courtroom footage? Maybe. If not, you can go find it. Definite media frenzy around this. But even if you know about it, you probably haven't heard about what exactly is happening now. They've just been resentenced, and that means parole is back on the table. So the question is that everyone's wondering, now that we're at this point, do they deserve it? Or is this just another emotional manipulation campaign dressed up as justice? Well, we're going to break it down, everything from the original case to the abuse claims, the public reversal, and what is really going on inside the California justice system. And then in segment 2, we go from courtroom heat to literal fire. Still in California, but California's on fire again. And yes, the headlines blame the wind. But let me ask you something. What if this isn't just about weather? What if this is negligence from the very people who are supposed to protect us? Well, we're going to dig into those wildfires that killed 18 people, destroyed thousands of homes. And if the lawsuits are right, they were caused by utility companies who knew what was coming, but they didn't shut off the power. Why didn't the planes show up fast enough? And why is the same thing happening year after year? Have you noticed? And more importantly, will anyone actually be held accountable for any of this? Or are we just going to keep letting the people with the money and the power burn the rest of us right to the ground? So yeah, that is today. If you've been craving a space where we talk about crime, real talk, power, accountability, this is your place. It's not sanitized. It's not filtered. Just raw stories, real questions, and clarity where there used to be chaos. So get settled, because I'm not going to shout. I'm just going to show you what's there. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Let's begin. So, the Menendez brothers. Let's go back, Not all the way to the night of the murders, but to what most people think they know, all right? 2 rich kids in Beverly Hills, spoiled, arrogant, shot their parents with a shotgun while they were watching television. And then they went on a shopping spree, Rolex watches, new cars, courtside tickets. All right, that's the version we all got in 1989. And let's be honest, that sucker stuck. The media turned it into theater. It was the first time many people ever saw a trial broadcast live like that. It's not like it is today. Court TV was still new, and the Menendez brothers, they were everywhere. People were not watching for justice, mind you. They were watching to be entertained. We get that now, right? Now, here's where it gets real. What most people didn't catch, or maybe what they didn't want to deal with, were the claims of abuse. The brothers said their father, Jose Menendez, had been sexually abusing them for years. They said their mother, Kitty, knew all about it and did nothing. The courtroom heard some of that, but the narrative outside the courtroom, well, it didn't care. America was in its tough on crime era. If you don't know about it, go ahead and look that up. And the idea that two wealthy kids could say abuse and then avoid the death penalty, well, people were hating that. They did not want complexity. They wanted villains. And Eric and Lyle, they were very easy to hate. Now, let's fast forward, okay? We're not in the 90s anymore. The culture has changed. And so has the way people process stories like this. In the last 5 years, this case has had a full-blown resurgence, if you haven't noticed, and not because of a new trial. It's because of social media, specifically TikTok, okay? People, young people, started digging into court transcripts, the footage, and the evidence that never made it into mainstream coverage. Very interesting. And they started asking, well, why was this part left out? Why did the judge block the defense from calling certain witnesses? Why were the abuse claims treated like a tactic, okay, not a possibility? You know, it's very refreshing to see these young people even having an interest in something like this. And the more people looked, the more cracks they found. Because here's what didn't fit the spoiled rich kid narrative. All right, there was a history of dysfunction in that house, and that was already set long before these murders. Eric had told his psychiatrist about the abuse before these murders ever happened. And family members, later they said they did suspect that something was off. And the defense never even got to show the jury some of the key corroborating evidence because the second trial was a lot tighter, a lot colder. Now, remember the first trial? Deadlocked. The jury could not decide. The second trial, conviction, life without parole. Very different. But that second trial excluded almost all the testimony related to the abuse. Okay, and this is where the story turns. Not because people are trying to make excuses for murder. It's because the legal system and the public, they're starting to recognize something that was flat out dismissed back then. The impact of long-term abuse. People talk about this over the water cooler at times. This is on the table today. It wasn't back then. And we're not just talking physical scars. We're talking about psychological distortion. It is a thing. Fear, dissociation, survival mode. What some call battered child syndrome, or more broadly, complex trauma, okay? That's what all this is. And we can hear complex trauma today and no one bats an eye. Of course it's a thing. But we bring up the Menendez brothers. Oh no. It's very interesting. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If Eric and Lyle Menendez were tried for the same crime today with those same claims of abuse, you know it would not look the same. So why do we struggle with this? I mean, it would still be controversial, for sure. But the idea of they did it all for the money, that would not be taken at face value anymore. And I'm sure you agree with me, because this is how it is in today's world. We would be taking a look at what kind of hell these guys were living in, because in today's world, we defend the people that have been abused. Abuse is wrong. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. All right, because that is exactly the problem with how this case was handled in the first place. Let's face it, people wanted a villain, a clean and clear villain. And here we have two brothers, privileged, heartless, and cold. They didn't want to deal with what it means when the monster lives inside the house, inside the mansion, when the perfect family is a cover for years of violation, manipulation, and fear. And that fear, well, it doesn't always look the way you expect, does it? It doesn't always scream or cry on cue, and we know that now. Sometimes it shops. Sometimes it just shuts down. Sometimes it waits until the abuser is asleep. Then it fires both barrels of a 12 gauge. We've seen it play out over and over again. The mistake wasn't just in how this case was prosecuted. It was how the world really refused to see the full picture, and how those on the other side really didn't want to give out the full picture. And when you look at that second trial, the one where they were convicted, it wasn't just a legal loss. It was a decision to silence the most disturbing part of the story. And we would not do that today. We wouldn't accept that. The judge barred key abuse witnesses. The media framed the defense as manipulative. And the jury, the second one, well, they never got the whole truth, not even close. And so now here we are, right? Decades later. New generations, new voices, new access to information. And the tide has started to shift. What used to be seen as an excuse is now being recognized, finally, as evidence. Not of innocence necessarily, but of why things happened the way they did, and whether the system responded with justice or with just vengeance. And that is why this case isn't simply going away. That is why TikTok completely blew up with Menendez content. And that's why documentaries keep coming. That is why every time you think you're about to forget about this case, because, right, you're forgetting about it, something else pops up. That's why I'm talking about it today. Because we're all living in an entirely different world now today. One where trauma doesn't hide as easily behind privilege. And that's what brings us to right now. Okay? Because last year, something happened that didn't make nearly enough noise in the mainstream press. But legally, it changed the game. The Menendez brothers were resentenced, not retried, resentenced under California's evolving law around juvenile defenders. And you might think, all right, well, wait, they were in their 20s when they committed the murders. How does that qualify? Well, we're going to get into that. Because it's complicated, it's controversial, and incredibly relevant to how this case is being viewed now today. But here's the headline. For the first time since 1996, parole is back on the table. And this time, the court can't pretend abuse didn't happen. The system is going to have to look. And California, the state that helped bury this story the first time around, is going to have to answer for more than just a double homicide in 1989. They're going to have to answer for what they ignored, what they dismissed, and what they silenced. And all right, now let's talk about how we got to this resentencing decades after the verdict was supposedly sealed, remember, if you didn't know. So back in 2022, California made a quiet but very powerful change. The state updated how it handles what's called youthful offender sentencing. And under that law, anyone who committed a crime under the age of 26 now has the right to a resentencing hearing, with their age and psychological development considered. Okay, it's very interesting how times are changing. I think this is very important. Psychological factors play a big part in crime, and I believe our laws are so behind on things like this. We are getting smarter, but our laws, they aren't changing fast enough. This is one of those examples of something happening that is trying to catch up. And I don't know why they keep this stuff so behind the scenes. This is interesting and something everyone should be able to know. It's a major shift, okay? Because it acknowledges something most courts used to ignore. And that's why these changes are needed so much right now across so many different things. All right? But in this particular case, youthful offender sentencing, this is because the brain doesn't even finish developing, especially in terms of judgment, impulse control, and trauma response until your mid-20s. So imagine being left alone during all of that time, and you are not even able to handle it. You have not developed the tools yet or the understanding. And they are recognizing that now today because it is an actual real thing. We cannot speed up our development process. We cannot take a pregnant woman and speed up the development of the fetus. We cannot do that with ourselves outside in this world as well. And it's good to see they're recognizing it. Okay. Both Lyle and Eric Menendez were under 26 when they pulled the trigger. Just because they didn't recognize that or understand that back then, it would be a major disservice not to recognize it now when we know so much about it. So, okay, in 2024, after years of legal wrangling and denied appeals, the Menendez brothers were granted a new sentence. Now, not a reduced one, it's not a retrial, but a sentence that now includes eligibility for parole. Big difference. But let me be clear, this does not mean they're getting out. Not today, and not without a fight. But what it does mean is that the door is now open, and the state is going to have to walk back in and take a good, hard look at everything it once refused to face. And we all know they hate to do that. They always think it makes them look bad and wrong, but it is irresponsible not to bring these cases up to date. And if technically all cases need to be reviewed, why is this one getting such a focus of why are we reviewing it? They're all getting reviewed. And these guys deserve the chance everyone's getting. But again, all it means is the door is open. And they are going to be able to look at things like the abuse, the trauma, the mishandling of the original trial overall, the way the media shaped public opinion before the jury even sat down. And I mean, in a way, that kind of should be against the law these days, right? It's too hard to avoid social media. It's integrated into our lives, yet the media can run wild and shape opinions. Is that due process? Something to think about in our today world because it all matters, all right? Parole isn't just about behavior in prison. It's also about context. What led to the crime? About whether the person sitting before the board today is the same person who committed all those acts all those years ago. And in this case, it's a very heavy question. I mean, Eric and Lyle Menendez, they didn't just get convicted. These guys got completely written off, right? Close it up, zip it up, lock it up, make it go away. They were branded sociopaths, spoiled killers, liars. They became a punchline for many. They were no longer people. However, for the last 30 years, these two have lived in prison, separate facilities, isolated from each other, and that's all they knew. That's all they had left. They had to carry the weight of what they did. and arguably the weight of what was done to them. Lyle has spoken publicly. He has apologized. He's talked about healing. He's advocated for trauma survivors. And that's where the division begins, right? Because not everyone believes this guy. There are two sides here. One says, come on, they killed their parents in cold blood. They don't get to spin this as trauma now. But the other side says, what if the trauma was the reason they snapped in the first place? What if we failed them as a system long before they ever picked up a gun? And that's the tension we're feeling out there. It's feeling like we're letting someone get away with something, but we also have to deal with the fact that we've learned about trauma. You know, when someone's traumatized, they don't just bounce back and start talking about it and realize what happened and everything's good to go and all right. It takes years to unravel. You know, the trauma response is an inward response for the person mentally, no matter how they're acting outside of themselves. We understand it more, we don't understand it fully, but to not include it, that seems like a crime in and of itself. And the tension, it's not even really about whether they're guilty. I mean, they are, right? We know they are. They have confessed. That isn't the question. It's the question people are wondering, you know, should that guilt come with a lifetime of punishment if the abuse they endured was real and severe and ignored? And if so, why does the state now recognize youthful trauma in other offenders? Why is it fair there but not in the Menendez case? If you're ever wondering what you feel about the Menendez case, because it gets confusing to even think about, just try to ask yourself how this would be handled today. Try to get to know the facts yourself. And then, you know, there's also the question of consistency. Because look around. Take yourself into your own research and look around. In recent years, other individuals who committed crimes under the age of 26, including violent crimes, they've been resentenced and they've already been released, guys. This is a show for us, and we should demand that it just get done. Because other people are being released every day. So if we're going to apply the law equally, what happens when the offenders are famous? And why are they famous? Because the media made them famous. They did not ask for that. And the other quiet offenders that have now been released, they're not talking either because they just don't want to get more famous. They want to be free and left alone. But the Menendez brothers, they're in a little box all their own. A pressure cooker. When the public still sees these guys as monsters, it's tough. Does justice shift based on how viral your trial was? Because that seems to be happening here. No one's asking about all those other cases that have already been released. Those offenders have been released. Go get mad about them. I mean, that's what makes this moment so powerful and so dangerous, okay? Because this isn't just about Eric and Lyle anymore. This is about how we decide what justice looks like in the face of abuse. And it is time we do just that, for real, out in the open. It's about whether prison is for punishment or for reform. What's the difference? When does it matter? It's about whether our system can admit when it got something wrong. Because if we don't let these guys out because they are public, but we're letting other offenders out that could have even been worse, that's what's wrong. And I mean, maybe most of all, it's about time. Time does something very strange, doesn't it? It dulls outrage. It spoils those carefully built narratives, and it forces us to ask, what's left now that we've all calmed down? What is it we actually believe? That is what we need to ask ourselves. And remember, all those other offenders, some are getting released today. The Menendez brothers have parole hearings coming. And they're not going to be flashy. They're not going to be on TV because they don't want us outraged. They don't even want us involved. They would rather this case just went away. But I can tell you it's very critical. If any of you out there have been abused, maybe it's something that you want to represent and get involved in. I don't know. But they're keeping it behind the scenes on purpose, and I'm just letting you know that in case you want to be involved. Because whether these two men are ever walking free again or not. The world is watching to see whether the system is capable of change or whether they're giving us just enough to satisfy us, but they're not going to admit they're wrong and they're just going to slam these guys behind bars forever when other people are walking every single day. This story is not done. It is evolving. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable part of all. I mean, what happens at the end of this case? Are they going to do the right thing based on other cases? And that's all it is. You're doing this for other cases. The law has been set. Why is this case different? Are they going to be able to follow through with what they're trying to do in California? Or are they going to continue to just keep this case where it is for their own egos and pride? Because that's what it's going to be. I mean, what if we don't get closure here? What if there's no clean ending? How are you going to feel? 2 broken lives sitting in a system that's trying to decide whether it is ready to admit it failed. I mean, that's really what's going on here. Just look at the other cases. Yep. Do your own research and find out where your truth really stands with it all. Keep an eye on things. We are going to here for sure. All right, now let's shift gears, but let's stay in California. Let's move on to those California fires. And not just all the images we all saw, the smoke, the flames, those evacuation orders. I am talking about what's behind it. What's really happening? Because it's not just nature anymore. Yes, I mean, California is dry. The wind is brutal. I've lived there. It definitely is a thing. Yes, the terrain is a nightmare. But wildfires that kill 18 people and destroy over 9,000 structures in a single sweep, that's not just weather. That is something else. And if you listen closely, not to the headlines, guys. I mean, headlines are dead, okay? If you want to hear about headlines, side note, I do headline lies every Monday and Friday, and I will cut through the ones that seem to go viral, that everyone hooks onto, that have pretty much no truth to them at all. So let's avoid those and click into those Monday and Friday. You're going to learn a lot. But here, if you listen closely, you need to be looking at the lawsuits, looking at those redacted reports, the statements that seem to get pulled hours after they're released. Okay? Because if you don't catch it, they'll pull it and then you miss it. You'll start to see it. Okay? Because the state is burning because of a deadly mix that includes negligence, greed, and delay. And we're all expected to just live with that. If they're quiet, they think we'll be quiet, right? Have you noticed that? We're in a Simon Says world, guys, where the headlines run the show. All right? If they're quiet, we're quiet. If they don't talk about it, we don't think about it. That's ridiculous. Back in January of 2025, the Eaton fire tore through Southern California. And please tell me you know about this, or you are under a rock. It wiped out homes, families, neighborhoods, entire blocks gone before sunrise. It was one of the deadliest and most destructive fires in state history. And according to multiple lawsuits, the cause was not a campfire, guys. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't even arson. It was Southern California Edison, a major utility company that allegedly failed to de-energize its power lines, even after red flag warnings were issued. And that means they knew the risk. They knew the conditions. They knew the system. And they left the power on anyway, guys. They just left it on. Now stop and think about that. That's not what you call an accident. That is a calculated decision not to act. Because shutting off the grid, that costs money, if you can believe it. It causes public outrage. It disrupts businesses. It leads to lawsuits of a whole different kind that they don't want to deal with, so they roll the dice. And when they lose, we see what happens. People die. And if you think I'm exaggerating, again, you got to start looking around for yourself, guys. Go look at the numbers. Southern California Edison is now facing multiple wrongful death lawsuits and hundreds more from property owners and survivors. Plaintiffs are alleging not just negligence, by the way, but gross misconduct. And we're not hearing about this on the news, are you? I know I'm not. They're saying the company knowingly let live wires swing through 50-mile-per-hour winds over dry brush across residential areas. And that this is not the first time. This is not a new playbook. And you'll hear me talk about playbooks a lot because that's what's happening to us. Playbooks are being used on the public just to help get results, help us to make decisions that we maybe never would have made, things like that. And it helps companies like this make decisions like this. It's the same one PG&E used. And if you remember, they were found responsible for the Camp Fire that killed 85 people in 2018, and they went bankrupt over that. And Edison is hoping you just don't remember that. But meanwhile, California's leadership, they're saying all the right things right now. Okay, saying we take this very seriously. We are investigating. We are investing in grid updates. But here's the truth, okay? I mean, that all sounds great. These are lines. These are words. And in today's world, if you haven't noticed, again, take a listen to Headline Lies. People can say anything and no one has any feelings or any sort of obligation to have it be true. So these kinds of lines, well, we've heard them all before. Every single time the state burns, there is a new task force. Ooh, helping out. There is a new promise. We'll get it this time. A new budget. We have what we need. But every year it burns again. So let's pause for a second, okay? Let's ask the real question. Who's accountable? If a man lights a brush fire, okay, he is arrested. And that makes sense to us. If a firefighter turns out to be an arsonist, and yes, that's happened, believe me, he is charged, tried, and convicted, or her, by the way. But when a billion-dollar company causes a fire, they cooperate with authorities. They tell you it's all under review, that they'll wait it out in court. And then the people who lost everything, they file their claims, but they all get lost in the system. They have to rebuild, but now it's all with trauma, not support, for sure not support. They feel betrayed, and they become a statistic. In a state that they were loyal to, a place they called home. So what's the plan here, guys? California wants to modernize the grid. Great. They want to bury power lines, upgrade systems, and invest in early detection. All sounds wonderful. What great ideas. And yet, the Eaton fire happened after those plans were already in motion. So I want to point that out. If you're hearing this, it does sound great. Can't say it enough. They've said this all before. It was already started. So how does this happen? More importantly, what does it tell you? It tells you that the money is there. The tech is there, but the urgency is not there. Because accountability doesn't exist for the powerful unless someone drags it into the light. And let's be very clear, this is not just about Edison. This is about the government, the agencies, the regulators, the ones who are supposed to act before the fires start. Not give you some good lines after the damage is done. There are reports that firefighting aircraft were grounded in the early hours of the fire due to airspace confusion. Yep. That means bureaucracy got in the way of saving lives. Local teams they had to wait for Cal Fire detectives. Cal Fire had to wait for federal confirmation. And in that window of delay, entire neighborhoods went up in smoke. And not one person has answered for that either. See what I mean? If they're quiet, we're quiet. And we don't know what's going on. And I'm here to tell you what is going on. We can't just talk about climate change and act like it's the only factor. They throw out those two words like that's the answer to everything. Gets everyone all outraged and off everyone goes. They're often running for climate change. And then we're not handling this problem. Yes, the climate is changing. And again, I say this too. The climate is changing for good and bad. It changes all the time, just like we as humans do. The earth is a thing. It's going to change. But that doesn't excuse corporate laziness or corporate betrayal, government delay, or a lack of political will. This is human failure wrapped in disaster branding. Okay? And the victims, they don't care what started it. They just want to know, why weren't we protected? Why is this allowed to happen again and again? And who's going to pay for it? Because let's be real, they're the ones who are paying now with their homes, their memories, family members, lives. Let's start to talk about accountability. I mean, not just as a word, but as a reality. Right now, there are two groups of people being held accountable for California's fires. All right, the first group, that's the easy ones. Those arsonists, right? Sounds great that they're arresting these people. Cal Fire reported 35 arson-related arrests already this year. Those would be people who lit fires intentionally, some of them with mental illness, some in crisis, and some were just reckless. And sure, when they're caught, they go straight to jail because that's simple. It's clean. It shows that something's being done about this. It's justice on paper. But what about the second group? The ones in suits. The ones sitting in Edison boardrooms, signing off on risk reports. That's you and me, right? Is it okay if we're a risk or running cost-benefit models for them that tell them shutting off power isn't worth the fallout for them. What happens to them? Nothing. Because their fire isn't set with a match, it's set with a spreadsheet. And somehow this matters. I mean, Southern California, Edison, is being sued right now. Yep, they are, but don't hold your breath. Those suits are going to take years. And the outcome's usually a settlement. No admission of wrongdoing. No one goes to jail. No one walks through the wreckage of what they caused. It was in the risk report. It's all okay. It's just another cost of doing business. It's so impersonal. I mean, if you're in California listening to this, maybe this happened to you. I can't imagine. And this is the part that hits hardest. I mean, we've normalized this. We're all walking around like this is just okay. Oh, well, fires happen. That's the California script. Every summer, we brace for it, they say. We prep. We watch the skies. And the people with power, they know that the people are doing that. They know the people are tired. They know the people are used to it. So when something burns, all they have to do is blame the wind, the heat, or that climate change. So easy. They say, stay safe. We are monitoring the situation and we are here for you. But they're not. They are there to protect themselves. The deeper truth here is that every time a fire like Eaton happens and no one's prosecuted, every time a utility claims we couldn't have known, every time a government agency says we are reviewing protocols, we send a message. We're telling the victims that, hey, you're just collateral. We tell the system, just make sure it doesn't get too ugly. What does that even mean? Because guess what? It's already ugly. Look around. 18 people died this year. Houses and families, pets have been destroyed, burned, suffocated, trapped. And no one's been charged for this negligence, for this looking away, for doing the wrong thing, even though procedures were set. Not a single person. Meanwhile, Edison has submitted a new $6.2 billion wildfire mitigation plan to state regulators. Wow, that's impressive. Sounds impressive. But what they're asking for? Rate increases. And they're promising to bury lines. They're talking about smart grids and fire-resistant equipment. And that all sounds wonderful. Until you realize, again, they have had these plans already. They've had budgets before. But still the fires come because plans don't stop fires. Plans need to turn into action. Things need to happen. And, no plan means anything if the people in charge know they are never going to face real consequences. If it was a money-smart move to keep the power on and take that risk and let all those fires burn and let those people die because of money? Do you really think this $6.2 billion wildfire plan can happen? That's a lot of money. So here we are. California is still burning. Not just the forest, but the people. Families are sleeping in shelters, okay? As we all get ready for summer, there are people in shelters that lost everything. Kids growing up with trauma now. Whole communities are just disappearing from the map, and no one's talking about it. In the system, it just keeps turning, sending out those press releases, making those promises, avoiding blame. We all just need to look away from all of that. None of that means anything. This isn't just a crisis of fire. This is a crisis of trust. If we don't start holding the people in power accountable, in court, in policy, in actual consequence, then it really is not a matter of if this will happen again. It's a matter of when and where and how many more people have to burn before we say it's enough. No more playbook. Let me tell you something nobody in these positions of power ever really wants to admit. Just never wants to admit. California is not burning because of climate. It is burning because of choices. The kind made in boardrooms. The kind made by bureaucrats. The kind of decisions that are made behind closed doors with their coffees and contracts and plausible deniability. And these choices, they don't come with warning labels. They don't scream, hey, this decision could kill a family in January. But they do. And the reason nothing changes, it's because we've built a system where the risk is worth it. If you're not the one paying the price. The utility exec won't lose his house, and he knows that. The state emergency coordinator won't be the one climbing on a roof with a garden hose to save his entire existence. The regulatory agency won't bury a child or stand on scorched earth wondering where their front door used to be. The people in danger are never the ones deciding how dangerous it's going to get. And that is the truth. I've said it before, justice does not always wear a badge, and sometimes accountability doesn't look like a courtroom. We've got to get out of our heads, guys, and see what's going on. Sometimes it looks like refusing to let the lie be the last word. Because even if the headlines say wind-driven fire, and the governor says, we are working on it, and then the utility says, we are upgrading infrastructure, but nothing changes. That is not miscommunication. That's what we call a cover. Let this pass. That's a system betting on the fact that you will forget, because most of us will. Why? Because it's not in our face. We have to start being responsible for what we care about and what we know as truth. Because the news cycle is going to move on. And then later you'll just chalk it up to nature and walk away and move on with your own life. But that's not what's going to happen on this show here. We are going to face these things and deal with what's being presented versus what the truth is. Because here on this show, we don't move on until we've pulled the whole thing into light. Because underneath every fire, every blown transformer, every blocked airdrop and delayed response, there is a choice that someone consciously made. And that person, they're walking free right now. They probably got a cash bonus. They have stock options, a PR rep on standby. While someone else, someone without that same power, is going through the ash with a plastic bag, trying to find any photo that didn't burn. And listen, I know this isn't glamorous. This isn't the kind of story that makes you feel good. But I'll tell you, I didn't come here to make people comfortable. I came here to say what is not being said, to help you out. Because until we stop normalizing disasters, until we stop giving the powerful a pass because it is so complicated, until we start calling out exactly who lit that match, this is going to keep happening. It is. It has been, and it is. And if that feels big, it is. And that is why I'm doing this podcast. This is True Crime and the Court of Public Opinion. And here the record stays open. The questions don't just stop because the camera cuts, and the people who think they are untouchable, they should really start paying attention, because the fire is not just outside. It's right here in the truth, and it's theirs to face. All right, and that's where we leave it today. 2 stories, both lit by power, both burned by silence. If you want the truth, stop scrolling. Click in and subscribe. This is where the truth lives. I am Alexis Knight, and I don't flinch. Talk to you guys the next time.